Good evening and welcome to Wednesday Night Live from Courtroom Confidential, the fastest growing true crime news channel on YouTube. Thank you guys so much for joining us on another Wednesday night. I'm exhausted. It has been a long day. It was one of those days where you saw it on the calendar creeping up on you and you knew you had a bunch to do, but it's all laid out and you believe that you've done the math correctly and can make it to every appointment that you're supposed to be at. And while you're in the middle of it, you're like, what in the world was I thinking trying to cram all of this into one day? But I did it and I survived and I'm here and I'm actually looking forward to this because this is a break having gone through what I went through today. So thank you all. Thank you to Robin Hood and Afton and Anna Lee and Mama She 13 and everybody in the chat. You guys are so fantastic. Yes, we are close to 20,000. Wouldn't that be fantastic if it happened on this show? Wouldn't that be a real treat for everybody? So Alicia K. Mayo, thank you everybody for being here. A lot of fun for you tonight. I'm going to keep this intro short because first up, we're going to talk about the latest in the never-ending saga of Blake Lively versus Justin Baldoni. And to do that, we have a special guest, and that is Melanie Little is going to be joining us. She is waiting for me to shut up so that she can get on screen and start chatting with me about this. She's done a lot of coverage on it. She's got some very interesting and unique insights that I want to hear, and I want to get caught up on it myself because there's so much going on. I haven't been able to dedicate the amount of time that it really is necessary to learn about this case. And it is interesting. Beyond the drama, it's interesting. So after that, though, for the poll this evening, if we have for the time, if we don't run out of time, here's the cases that we will discuss. Either Kouri Richins, she has these new motions that she filed. I talked a little bit about it on Monday, but we ran out of time. So we can finish talking about that. Fascinating stuff. Fourth Amendment law, search and seizure, Sixth Amendment right to counsel, Miranda issues, all of it. Bryan Kohberger's got new motions. Get a little bit in depth as to whether or not the defense is out on a limb or if they've got anything behind these motions, talking about trying to suppress the DNA in that case. No shocker, the whole case hangs on that. And then David Pearce, that's the case here in Los Angeles with the gentleman who dropped two beautiful young women off at different hospitals near death, and both of them ended up dying. He testified. He took the stand, and so we could talk about what he actually said. And stay tuned to the very end because we always have special announcements for you guys. So hit the like button, subscribe button. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And without further ado, this is Melanie Little. Hello, my friend. How are you?
Hi, Josh. How are you?
I'm very good. I appreciate you. I know how busy you are, and I appreciate you doing this. And I appreciate you doing this on this topic because it's one of those topics that a lot of people are interested in. And I just, you're trying to be up to speed on everything else. And this is one of those that kind of slipped through the cracks a little bit for me. And I'm like, I don't feel comfortable talking about it unless I know I'm talking to someone who knows more about it than me. So you're that person for me.
Well, I can't claim to know every single thing about it. Like many people in the chat might. Hi, guys. I see a lot of people I recognize in the chat. Everyone's smash that subscriber button for Josh because we want to see him get to 20K. And if it happens
Wouldn't that be fun if it happened on the show? Yeah, that would be very fun. Yeah,
that'd be so fun.
We are very close.
And when you called me to do this, I'm like, you sure you want to do this case, Josh? You sure you want to do this? Because people are so divided on this case. So divided.
People are hot under the collar about it.
Yeah, just fans of either Justin or Blake. It's like people are dug into one side. They do not want to hear anything but the side that they're rooting for. And, it's also one of those celebrity battles, I guess.
Yes. And they're also I feel like people are kind of switching sides too. Like I feel like the momentum has maybe shifted a couple of times in this case where some initially, even myself, when all the news broke, it seemed like a lot of it painted Justin Baldoni in a very negative light. Maybe not him personally, but his PR people seemed very kind of dirty and underhanded, and they were up to all this kind of shady stuff, and the text messages were coming out. Even Tiffany, my wife, that's kind of her world. She came from is publicity, and she's like, yeah, this is some shady stuff what they were up to. And then he's on the internet and being like changing the narrative. And now I feel like it's a lot of people are on his side of this whole thing. Can you, in the best that you can, I'm not, you're obviously not going to be tested on this, but can you kind of walk us through where things stand right now as far as like legally and lawsuit wise and everything?
Well, why don't we do like a timeline from the beginning, just to catch, because maybe there's a lot of people here who don't know what's going on. So Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively made a movie. It's called It Ends With Us. It's a movie that is based on a book by Colleen Hoover. I've read the book. It came out in the court papers that Blake did not read the book. And that's another reason why a lot of people don't like Blake. It is a movie about domestic violence. That is the theme of the book. The book is about It Ends With Us, ending the cycle of DV, which I guess we have to say on YouTube. And it's about a woman who falls in love with a guy. He's a doctor, a neurosurgeon, and he becomes abusive. They have a child together. I won't spoil it for anyone at the end. It Ends With Us is a movie. Justin Baldoni has built a platform of being, I guess, a male feminist, or someone who is, I guess, how else would you describe his platform? He's got a podcast. He's been very open about his struggles with his former addiction to, I guess, dirty magazines. We're not really allowed to say that on the air either. Pornography, and other struggles that he's had. So he's sort of like a male feminist, I guess you would say.
Right.
He bought the rights to the Colleen Hoover book, It Ends With Us, to, I guess, because that's part of his platform, right? Supporting all women. And he buys the rights to the book. He hires Blake Lively to play the female lead in the film. They start shooting the film, and you know what happened in Hollywood. There was a writer's strike, then there was an actor's strike. And so while they started filming before the writer's strike, they had to pause production during the writer's strike. Then there was the actor's strike. And then when they went back into production, Blake Lively had some complaints about the way things were going on set. And she came back and said, I'm not going to come back to work unless Wayfarer, which is the studio backing this movie that Baldoni is part owner in, and Jamie Heath is his partner in that studio, I have a list of demands that I want you to agree to. And they were such things as, do not show me any pictures of naked women or videos of your wife giving birth, or do not be coming into my trailer when I'm topless. Don't talk to me about your personal sex life.
All demands which, if we're believing that he had actually done this stuff, and that's why she's telling him don't anymore, sounds like awful stuff.
Yes. And so her initial complaints were of sexual harassment on set, hostile work environment. And these are all employment discrimination claims, as you know. And so Baldoni and Heath agree to this list of demands, and they go back into production and they film the movie. And then around the time of the premiere, which was this past August of 2024, people on the internet started noticing that Blake and Justin were never at the same place at the same time. They weren't doing the press tour together. They were avoiding each other. Members of the cast and crew had unfollowed Justin on Instagram. This was like the big thing that kind of set everything off, that the internet sleuths started to realize, like, what's going on. They started rumblings of these problems on set. And then Blake started promoting the film, and people didn't like how she promoted the film by saying, grab your friends and your florals and come see our movie. But as we learned through some of these court documents, that may have been exactly what the marketing plan was. Fast forward a little bit, when word starts getting out of the fact that Blake might start making some of these allegations that she had on set public, the allegations are in the complaint that Justin hired a crisis PR team to get ahead of this in case Blake started making these complaints public. He hired this crisis PR team to get ahead of that. And the allegations, and remember, these lawsuits are just allegations. We can't say that this is true, that's true, these are just allegations and complaints. And that's always the way that complaints are drafted. And there's so many people out on the internet that think, well, it said this, so that's really true. And, lawyers draft complaints based on the best interest of their client. These are things that they're going to have to prove at trial, right?
So he hires this crisis team in anticipation that even though she had not done it yet, but anticipation that she might leak it.
Right.
Like he saw trouble on the horizon and hires this, proactively hires this PR team.
That's what the allegation is.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then the allegation is that they started to destroy her reputation.
Right.
In advance of these allegations becoming public, and as and all of these lawsuits have thousands of pages of text messages attached to them and all kinds of leaks. It's hard to even do this in a chronological order. So that's what happens in August. And then
it did. I don't follow this stuff, so I'm like the perfect person to kind of give the non-attached opinion of all of this. But even I did start to notice that there did seem to be a lot of negative attention to Blake during this time. Like you were seeing old interviews she did where it appeared as though she was being very rude to people and stuff like this started popping up. Well, it sounds like, at least according to her team, that wasn't all just organic, but that was kind of manufactured.
That's what they're claiming. They're claiming this thing called, it's a new term for me, astroturfing. Maybe your wife is familiar with astroturfing. Astroturfing is the opposite of a grassroots campaign, where you hire people to go out and push this internet public narrative by using bots and things like that maybe it's not that organic, but it's made to look organic.
Right.
So come December, just this past December, we're only in January now. God. December 20th. This is where it all starts. December 20th, right before Christmas, the New York Times sends an email to Baldoni's team, or Baldoni and his attorneys, and says, we're going to drop an article tomorrow. We need a comment from you by noon. Here's all the allegations that Blake Lively is making against you and your team. Go.
Wow.
They're like, what? So what happens the next day? They don't even wait until noon. The New York Times drops the article at 10 a.m. And the article is entitled, "We Can Bury Anyone Inside a Hollywood Smear Machine." God. And it is an article that sets forth all of these allegations that Blake Lively sets forth in her complaint that she filed with the California Civil Rights Department. So I guess the allegation is that she leaked this complaint to the Times. We don't really know how they got it.
Gotcha.
That's not a public filing,
Right.
It's similar to an EEOC complaint. So when you file, just for everyone out there who doesn't know, when you file a lawsuit, when you want to file a lawsuit regarding sexual harassment or discrimination claims, you are typically required, depending on the state that you're in, to file a complaint first with the Civil Rights Department or the EEOC. And then either that organization will investigate the complaint or they will give you a right to sue letter. So you can't just go out and start a lawsuit for these types of claims. You have to follow certain procedures. And unlike a court docket, those filings are not public. So somehow the Times got a hold of this civil rights complaint that Blake Lively filed.
Somehow.
Right. And thousands of pages of text messages between Baldoni and his PR people and Heath. And so all of those text messages, or many of them, were included in the civil rights complaint that Blake Lively filed. After that, all the backlash starts
against him, right? Because this article rips apart him and his PR team, and there was some kind of ugly stuff that it looks like at least the text message exchanges between some of his PR people were having. I mean, they're talking about, oh, we're going to destroy. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but it was like, we're going to destroy them, and I can't believe people are falling for that. It seemed very,
we can bury anyone.
Evil, yeah.
We can bury anyone. And then he wrote messages back, sending screenshots of other people that kind of got buried, other celebrities. And she's like, well, and one of the women is like, well, we can do that, but we can't put that in writing. Why do you think I'm the best? And there's a lot of, look, all of these things are open to interpretation, right? So her team is going to say this shows concrete evidence that they were conducting and orchestrating this smear campaign against me. His team is going to say, wait a second, these are all doctored. There's messages missing. You're taking them out of context. And so, I can see both sides of this. Well, both sides are going to argue. So her complaint that she filed with the California Civil Rights Department included claims of a pervasive hostile work environment, sexual harassment, retaliation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, negligence, things like he was talking to her about his previous pornography addiction, that Jamie Heath showed her a video of his wife giving birth in a hot tub, like a tub.
Nice.
Him and his wife were naked with a baby because there was a birthing scene in the movie. He was trying to convince her to be naked because all women, he says, give birth naked, which I have 5 kids. It's not, I never did. So I don't know.
Let me ask you, just so I can understand, is she claiming in her lawsuit that all of that happened before or after this meeting that they had where she's like, I'm not going to continue until you meet these demands?
I think most of the allegations were before. And then
she's saying so she's still suing him, even though she made these demands and he apparently complied by them. She's now suing him anyways.
Some of them may have happened after. I can't be 100% sure on that. But the allegation is because he was afraid that I was going to speak out about this, he retaliated against me. And one of the things that we agreed to was that he was not going to retaliate against me. So not only did he retaliate against me by hiring this crisis PR firm to come in and publicly smear me and orchestrate this whole campaign against me, but now his attorney is making a lot of comments in the media, and that's kind of where we are now. So
yeah, lot.
There's also go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead. No, please.
So much to say. There's also Steve Sarowitz is a billionaire who is involved somehow with Wayfarer Studios. There was a text message from Sarowitz that said something to the effect of, I will spend $100 million to destroy her. Wow. And that's kind of like just one little indicia of where we kind of are today.
Yeah,
because there's been actual lawsuits filed after this complaint.
And it is not cooled down at all. Like I thought originally, these people have so much to lose as far as reputation and endorsements and all of this other stuff that I thought we would see this kind of big flare up, and then they would all have some, kumbaya moment where they would go on Ellen together and hug it out and everything would be fine because even though they could secretly hate each other for forever, they've got too much to lose as far as, how the public views them. But it is not done that at all. It's just gone nuclear, right?
It is ramping up and ramping up and ramping up. So after this New York Times article drops, Baldoni, William Morris Endeavor, who is the talent agency that represents Blake Lively, her husband Ryan Reynolds, and Justin Baldoni, drops Baldoni like a bad habit. Like he's gone. Like that day, the day the Times article comes out, William Morris Endeavor drops him as a client. On New Year's Eve, Baldoni files a lawsuit against the New York Times in LA Superior Court. So he files that in state court.
So tell me, is there a strategy behind that? Why sue the New York Times in LA in state court?
State court moves slower than federal court. So was it a PR move? Maybe. I've heard that the New York Times has never lost a case. So I don't know.
Right. On libel. Right.
Right.
It just seemed to me like an odd decision, and therefore I thought a strategic decision that I was somehow missing. Do you know what I mean?
Right. I think initially it was a way to get his narrative out there or his side of the story out there without filing a lawsuit against Blake Lively.
Right. It was interesting. That's one thing I think that it's like he's allowed to unleash on her, but not look like he's unleashing on her because he's going after the New York Times.
Right. Not yet anyway. Right. And maybe that was part of the grand plan. Maybe that was part of the strategy, but it's kind of like New Year's Eve, Happy New Year. Right. And then, so he's suing the New York Times for libel for $250 million. So that's in California. And then the next thing to happen is that, and it's unclear about the timing, either that same day or the next day, which would be New Year's Day. Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds, and others sue Baldoni, Wayfarer, and others in New York federal court. And those allegations are basically the same as the ones that she filed in the California civil rights complaint.
And that's an interesting strategy too, that she does it in federal court. And I'm wondering, I feel like state court is far more transparent and open. And if you want to air dirty laundry, that's where you might file things. But filing it federally, tell me if you agree or
no cameras, no cameras in federal court.
A little more, closely guarded the information. And I'm wondering if that was also strategic.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. They live in New York. It's filed in New York. There's no cameras in the courtroom there. And, federal court's no joke. Federal court moves very quickly. There's no delays. There's no, hey, judge, we're not done with discovery yet. We still have more depositions to do. No, there is a tight timeline, and it's very, very strict. The rules are very strict.
Yeah. Yeah.
So she files that lawsuit against them. And then that was January 1st. I said January 16th, Baldoni sues Lively and Reynolds for $400 million, also in federal court in New York.
God, in a cross complaint?
No, it's a separate lawsuit. There's some parties that are different, but what has happened since then is that the New York federal court judge, Louis Lyman, who's assigned to this case, is going to consolidate the cases. He's assigned to both of these cases. He issued an order, I think yesterday or the day before, moving up their pretrial hearing or pretrial conference to February 3rd, which I think is next week.
Yeah.
And he's already set a trial date for March of 2026. So this thing is on a tight timeline. It's like, you're going to be trying this case in a little over a year.
And federal court too will keep you to that timeline.
Oh yeah.
Like there's not a lot of monkeying around with, we want to continue here, continue there. They're like, no, we set this train is coming to the station. Okay.
Right.
That was wonderful. And I feel like I know so much more about this than I did.
That was easy.
10 minutes ago. So thank you. But I got some questions for you. First, about this trial date. Do you think this will actually go to trial? Like, are we going to be seeing them actually hashing this out in trial? Or is this game of chicken going to finally come to an end with a bunch of NDAs and a bunch of settlements and everything else?
It's like, do you have the magic 8-ball? We could just shake it and say, I don't think it's good for anybody to keep this going. No. I just don't see it. I just don't see any winners in the end. This is a $400 million lawsuit. You know that when you file a lawsuit, you can pick any number you want. I mean, it doesn't really matter. It's just, and typically in these types of cases, you're not supposed to put a number on it. You're supposed to say, at least in New York, for any just and further relief, the court deemed whatever amount we're awarded at trial, or, you usually don't put a number in there anymore. I mean, this was obviously a headline grabber, right?
Sure.
Because now the New York Post today is reporting that, hey, guess what? $400 million is more than the net worth of Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds put together. So it's a big number.
I feel like it's not even about the money too, as much as it's like reputation at this point. And if that is what it's about, then it seems to me like you're right. There's no winner in this, but there can certainly be big losers. And it seems like Blake and Ryan Reynolds would have far more to lose than Justin Baldoni.
Yeah. Right.
Like to me, it's like, he's like, okay, you want to get nuts? Let's get nuts. And it's like, I don't really have as much to lose as you folks. You're the, princess and prince of this whole world. And he's like, let's have it. Because he's now, the other thing I wanted to ask you is, since they filed, interestingly, a lawsuit in federal court, they've kind of kept their mouth shut and asked even the judge to keep everybody's mouth shut, while
Blake and Ryan
have, while Baldoni and his lawyer Brian Friedman, who is no joke and also not shy, has
no shrinking violet.
Right, no shrinking violet, has gone
on a press tour. He's gone on a press tour
with the amount of stuff they're releasing and the amount of press conferences and interviews and everything he's doing.
He is. He's doing a lot of press. He's dropping. He dropped some footage. He dropped that dance scene that was referenced in Blake's complaint, And in his complaint, this was a scene that it was supposed to be shot MOS without sound, and he was mic'd, I guess, for it. So they did get some sound. And look, I can also see this clip being interpreted both ways. He released this clip saying, look, this proves that she was not harassed, that he did everything by the book, and that she's lying. And her people say this proves exactly what I'm saying, that I was uncomfortable on set, that this scene was not choreographed, that he was making me uncomfortable, and I'm just trying to get away from him.
Her allegation during this scene is that he licked her neck and said, "You smell so good," in the middle of them filming this, which when you read that on paper sounds awful, sounds super creepy, sounds awful, sounds inappropriate. I don't care if you're acting or not. Sounds like it plays into her version of events. Yeah. When you watch it, the whole scene, they're very kind of intimate and playful but they're having like a conversation. You're right. I guess she could say, well, yes, this is what I was talking about. But I think she received a little more backlash from this than him, because people looked at it and were kind of like, well, that's not as creepy as I thought it was going to be.
But I mean, isn't that like isn't that a perception thing?
Yeah,
like we cannot really put ourselves into her shoes. And when you watch this video, you can see him go down her neck with his mouth, but it's on the right side of the screen. So it's kind of like not on the side where the camera is. So you don't, and people are saying, well, she said that, he said it smells so good. And she said something like, because we can hear some sound, she says, well, that's my spray tan. Actually, it's my body makeup. And then they're claiming that she said that he had a big nose, but he's the one who makes a joke about his nose. And then she sort of plays along with it. But then he says something really nasty about her co-star. And he says, well, why do you think I hired Jenny? She's got a big nose too. So like, this doesn't really help him as much as I think his attorneys think that it does.
Yeah.
And, there was an intimacy coordinator who gave her an interview, I think, to the Hollywood Reporter, who said that, look, this scene was not choreographed. These scenes are supposed to be choreographed, whether there's sound or not. And they need to work it out in advance. Intimacy coordinators are a relatively new position on Hollywood sets, right? Mm-hmm. So it's to make everyone feel safe. And, I see in the comments, like some people are saying, yeah, they were acting, but under SAG rules, you're supposed to choreograph these things.
That's interesting. So you're saying even in a scene like this, where to me, it looked like they're just kind of like, okay, let's set up the camera and let's kind of improvise us being intimate and dancing with each other.
Right.
But you're saying even then they're supposed to kind of have a game plan.
Yeah. They're supposed to be like permission. They're supposed to choreograph it ahead of time. Since the whole Me Too thing, they're very strict. Yeah. The SAG rules are very strict about this kind of thing. And I mean, to me, she looks uncomfortable. But again, some of the things she said in her complaint are a little bit off from what we hear the dialogue of the two of them saying to each other in this scene, which was like supposed to be a slow motion dance scene. And, she's going to say there wasn't supposed to be any intimacy. He's going to say, yes, there was. And then there was that voicemail that was just released, or a voice note.
So I have the voice. I'm not going to play the whole thing.
I mean, if people haven't heard it, it's crazy.
I want to play some of it because I think it's important to hear kind of his voice and tone, and then we'll chat about it. So let me just play some of it. I don't want to play it up too much.
And just to set it up, this was at 2 a.m. 2 a.m. He's leaving her this voice note. I don't think it was a voice message. I think it was like, how you can hit like the microphone on your iPhone and you can leave someone a voice note.
Right. Like it's you could, he's not leaving a voice mail. It's
right. Like he didn't call her and leave a message.
Right. And that was my first question, because I'm like, how in the world does he still have this if he left her a voicemail? But he didn't. He recorded a voice note and then texted it to her, essentially. So he still has a copy of it. Okay. And then he released it.
At first I didn't realize that. At first I thought she released it because I thought it helped her. So I was so confused by that.
That's the thing too, is this with Brian Friedman and him, they're just being like, here's everything. Yeah. In fact, they want to do a website. I don't want to get them ahead of myself.
Yeah, they want to launch a website. I want to
ask you about is this website. But let's listen to just a few moments of this.
Hey, Blake. It is 2 a.m. Hopefully this does not wake you up. Whew. Wow. There's so much I want to say to you, and I hope that we can FaceTime or see each other in person soon and get to talk more. But I'm just going to send you a few thoughts, and hopefully it's not going to be more than a few minutes. But that I don't have the best track record. I don't think either one of us have the best track record for our voice memos. I want to start with an apology. Man, reading the second part of your message, my heart sank. And I'm really sorry. I for sure fell short. And you worked really hard on that. And the way you framed it and how that made you feel, I just want to say thank you for sharing that with me. That takes a lot of trust and vulnerability, and I feel really grateful that you feel safe enough to tell me that that's how you feel and share that with me. And I'm really sorry. I fucked up. That is a fail on my part. One thing you should know about me is I will admit and apologize when I fail. I am far from perfect. I'm a very flawed man, as my wife will attest. And and I'm going to fuck up. I'm going to say the wrong thing. I'm going to put my foot in my mouth. I'm going to piss you off probably, but I will always apologize and find my way back to center. That is one thing I can assure you of.
Okay. He's kind of making admissions there, right? Like, I am going to say the wrong thing. I am going to put my foot in my mouth. So like, that's why I thought she released this, because I'm saying, first of all, if you heard this man leaving a message like this on your wife's voicemail, how would you react to that? And at the end,
I feel like I went through puberty again listening to this. But
at the end, he says something like, "I can't wait to have all of you."
It's a listen. I don't know.
This is also after
we obviously don't know him. I don't know how he is as a human being otherwise. I don't know if this is just kind of how he talks and how he conducts himself. You're right. He kind of very in touch with his feelings and male femininity, and all of that kind of seeps through in the way, even the words he's using and the way he's talking during this thing. But 2 a.m., this is a very intimate sounding voice message that, had my wife received this from another man, you would be talking about my trial on your channel sometime soon.
Right. See, that's your gut reaction to it, right?
Yeah.
And this is, again, the timing is like, this is when she was texting him the stuff about, I'm Khaleesi and I have these dragons and they stick up for me. And, as after she rewrote allegedly the rooftop scene, and there's a whole thing. And this is his response to that, where he's apologizing for, I guess, his reaction to her rewrite.
Okay, so
we're just putting it in context. Like, he didn't just out of the blue at 2 a.m. send this to her. So
at one point, you're absolutely right, though. At one point, it seems like he's making admissions where he's apologizing.
Right.
But at the other point, another way to view this, putting aside the timing of it and the kind of the sound of his voice, is that it sounds like he's being really cognizant of her feelings and trying to accommodate her and trying to be as, gentlemanly and apologetic. And I'm going to make mistakes, and I'm sorry you felt that way, and I want to work this out, which makes you kind of, I don't know, empathize maybe with the position he was in, where it maybe paints her in a light of being, very demanding or very, prone to being insulted or something. I don't know. Like, I don't know.
Too sensitive.
Too sensitive. Right. I wonder, does this help or hurt him? But his team obviously felt it helped him, because they're the ones who released it.
That's what we're finding out now. Yeah. And so now, Blake's attorneys have been firing off letters to the federal court judge in New York saying, listen, you need to gag this guy. This guy is out there trying to taint the jury pool. Brian Friedman is saying he's on Megyn Kelly like every night. I mean, not every night. Don't hold me to that, but he's been on Megyn Kelly's show a lot. He's been trying to taint the jury pool. He's been bad-mouthing Blake still, and he's been saying all kinds of crazy things, and they're setting them forth in these letters to the judge, and they're like, Judge, we need a gag order on him because he's clearly doing things not only that are painting a false public light about our client, but also that are unethical under the rules, under the professional rules of responsibility that all lawyers are supposed to adhere to. So the judge has, in that case, he's pushed the conference up from February 12th to February 3rd
to discuss
so that they can discuss this issue. Yeah.
Interesting. Because my last kind of thing I wanted to get into with you is not only does his team not indicate that they're going to let up on this, but they're now threatening to create an entire website with everything.
Releasing all the text messages. Yeah.
My questions are twofold. One, can he do that? Can a judge shut them down from doing that? And two, it seems as though his whole team has taken the strategy of, you want to know what was really going on? We're going to show you everything. We've got nothing to hide from. We've got nothing to be afraid of. Here's everything. Judge for yourselves. They seem like they're doing a court of public opinion trial here, and they seem to feel like the court of public opinion might be on their side.
And you know what's so weird about that too is, I mean, if they're threatening to do this, doesn't that sort of prove the claim of trying to orchestrate a smear campaign? I mean, isn't that sort of proving the truth of the matter asserted? Like, here we are saying that you went in and already did this, and now you want to double down and keep doing it. Yeah. Because all of this stuff is open to interpretation. I mean, people could read those text message threads and take them one way, and a different juror could take them a different way. Yeah. So the judge absolutely can shut them down from doing that. And I think that's probably what's going to happen on February 3rd. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's one of those cases where at first I thought, you know what, this is not my wheelhouse. This is not what I'm going to get into. But now I feel like it's got a lot of interesting legal issues to talk about too. Do you mind if we just do a couple of these questions? Are you okay?
No,
do I still have some time with you? Shy Gal, thank you so much, says, please tell us how you tied to the movie. I did watch it and they made the wrong choice.
Oh, that is very sweet. Well, also, I actually auditioned for this movie. So before I started my YouTube channel, I had taken like a hiatus from the practice of the law. And I said, I want to pursue my dream of becoming an actress, whatever. So, and then, writer strike, pandemic, SAG strike. But I did audition for this movie to play Blake Lively's mother. And so that's why when all this stuff came out, all this tea, I thought, oh my, what if I had been on set? This is what I do for a living. I'm a civil litigator. I could have helped. Yeah. But I didn't book it. Someone else booked it. Someone else played Blake Lively's mother, but that's why I do have a special interest. Well, but thanks for bringing that up, Shy Gal.
Their loss, and I don't know who played her mother, but I'm sure you deserved it more. But I did not realize that. Let's see. May Lady says, actors and actresses not reading the source material is not uncommon. I feel this is such a
yes, nitpicky argument. Yes, because they were saying, Blake didn't even read the book. She didn't even read the book. And a lot of actors don't want, in their processes, they don't want to be influenced by the book. They want it, to have their own interpretation. The screenplay should tell you everything you need to know, right?
Yeah.
About your character. Right. So, well, the fact that they're shading her for not reading the book, I think is kind of silly too. I agree.
Okay. Is that something that they've been accusing? Even his team has been like, she didn't even read the book, as if she didn't really care. Gotcha.
That's part of their allegations. Yeah. And there was text messages or something about it.
Krista Johnson says, I have a suspicion that Blake's husband is behind this, in my opinion. So Blake's husband, obviously Ryan Reynolds. One of the things we didn't get into this evening, but I've talked about before, is one of the allegations is that he created a character in his Deadpool movie to mock Justin Baldoni. And at first I thought, this seems like they're really stretching. But then you realize that some of the lines being said are perhaps references to some of this beef that was already taking place between them. Like, he talks about Blake actually plays a character of Lady Pool in that movie. And he talks about how she bounces back so quickly from being pregnant, which apparently was a deal. He does make a reference to the intimacy. What is it? Intimacy coordinator.
Yep.
So there might be some to him being.
I'm sure it was. I'm sure. Thing. Isn't that the whole
he's maybe more behind this than we realize?
People think that. People think that maybe he listened to that, and like you just said, if I heard that voicemail on my wife's phone, I'd be the one on trial. So who knows if he got wind of this, if he saw messages between them, and then he could be the driving force behind this. Like, you're not going to let this guy walk all over you, or I'm not going to let this guy embarrass me. A lot of people seem to feel that way, that Bryan Reynolds is the driving force behind this. How are we to know? I have no idea. Maybe it'll come out.
I don't have any idea either, but I go back to my point of they are so A-list in my stupid view of Hollywood, right? Mm-hmm. But it's like I see them in the box at Chiefs games with
Taylor Swift. They brought her into it too.
I mean, they're walking amongst the glitterati of the world. Yeah. And Justin Baldoni, I don't think I'd ever heard of his name before this. Again, that means nothing that I don't know. Right. But it seems like they are so powerful and rich and famous that I don't understand from their perspective picking this kind of a fight.
I think for them it was all about, or for her, it was all about getting her reputation back, because there was a lot of public backlash against her. Still, there are a lot of people who just hate Blake Lively for whatever reason or for no reason.
Yeah.
And she wanted to push back against that and say, listen, here's what happened to me on set, allegedly. And this is what they did to me. And that's why there's all this hatred against me and backlash. But there are a lot of very real people in the chat that we know are not bots in my chat and your chat who, for whatever reason, just hate her.
Yeah. Starting to seem that way, so right? It does seem like this may have backfired even on her.
Right.
Loyalty 55 says, Attorney Little, are you familiar with BL letting NYT, the New York Times, know she was going to file a sexual harassment lawsuit before she actually filed? Do you know about that?
They had a copy of her civil rights complaint when they filed the article. I mean, when they published the article. So the allegations are that she and her team were working with them behind the scenes for months before they published this article. So that's what the allegations are, if that's what she's referring to.
Wow.
Yeah.
Melanie, you are a saint for putting up with getting into the mud with me on this whole thing. It's far more fascinating than you realize. I think it is a bunch of Hollywood drama and rich people arguing with other very rich people arguing with less rich people, but it is got some interesting legal issues attendant to it as well. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for walking us through this. Thank you for all of your help and everything. I appreciate you.
Oh, anytime, Josh. I'm here for you. Anytime.
You are the absolute best. All right, take care.
Okay.
Hey,
thanks
before you
for
go,
having me.
Everybody go, if you haven't already, go over to Melanie's channel, check it out, subscribe. It's well worth it. You will absolutely enjoy all the content that she's pushing out. And I find you to be an inspiration. So thank you.
Thank you. Bye, Tiffany. See you guys.
Bye. Yeah, way more going on in this poop storm than at first it appears. So I'm glad that we were able to kind of walk through some of that. But we haven't covered it a bunch on this channel, but I wanted you guys to get some of those insights. Farm Girl, thank you so much for the gift. The Goodmans became a member. You're fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. Emily became a member, and you are fantastic as well. So thank you guys all so much. Do we have the poll? Do we have our results, Kaylin? Kaylin! She's giving me the hold on 1 second finger. Remember, if we do even have it still open, last chance, it was Kouri Richins, new motions, Bryan Kohberger, new motions, or David Pearce. Kohberger with 47%. Okay, very good. Let's get into it. Let's talk a little bit about that, and maybe we'll have time for something else if we have time left over. Bryan Kohberger. Okay. So there is absolutely zero mystery to me, and I'm sure to all of you, as to why the Kohberger team is, one, being aggressive to begin with. Thank you so much, Mama She. That's very kind of you. one, being so aggressive to begin with, and then two, being so aggressive on this case, particular to the DNA. First, this happens with these types of cases. When the death penalty is on the table, defense attorneys, many times, not always, but many times, turn it up a notch. There are many kind of dyed-in-the-wool defense attorneys who, in death penalty cases in particular, view it as if they have a righteous calling to save their client's life. And you will see many times defense attorneys doing, making arguments that are kind of far-fetched, many times doing things borderline unethical. I am not at all saying that's taking place here, but I've witnessed it in my career, because they feel like there really is no rules when you're trying to save your client's life. And many defense attorneys view this that way. I know I'm casting a wide net here, but I am generalizing. So I think that some of that is at play in this case. They feel that they are now, their entire job is to save their client's life in Bryan Kohberger. Because they also probably view this as a case where if he is convicted, he will very likely get the death penalty, because you are talking about, if putting aside if you believe the death penalty should be on the books or not, if the death penalty is on the books, it should be reserved for the worst of the worst, the most heinous of crimes, the most nightmarish of conduct. This is it. Stabbing to death 4 innocent college students as they sleep in their beds is the type of conduct that should be reserved for the death penalty. Ethan Chapin, Kaylee Gonzalez, Zaina Kernodle, and Madison Mogan, there they all are, meeting the end of their lives in the most nightmarish and horrible way that you can possibly imagine. And the idea that there are 4 sets of parents who got phone calls late at night, early in the morning, telling them something like this, I can't even picture. So yes, if we're going to have the death penalty on the books, this is exactly the type of case it would be reserved for. I think his attorneys realize that, and they know, okay, we got to go for broke here if we want to save this man's life. And the reason, and again, I don't think I'm giving you guys anything you don't already know, that they're going after the DNA, is the entire linchpin of this case is that DNA. The prosecution, I think, has done an incredible job in their investigation, and they have found, his cell phone activity. And isn't it mysterious that he turned it off during the time of the murders? And they found, surveillance video that seems to have a vehicle matching his to be at or near the location of the murders at the time of the murders. And they have this eyewitness, who we're going to talk about a little bit more this evening, who sees someone remarkably similar to the description of the defendant in the house at that time. And other little pieces of corroborating circumstantial evidence. But without the DNA, this case doesn't even get filed. This entire case comes down to that DNA. And if you don't know what that is, they have now matched his genetic profile to DNA that was recovered from a button snap on a knife sheath. No knife was ever recovered, but a knife sheath, and the knife that would go to that knife sheath matches the wounds found on the 4 victims. So believed to have been the murder weapon, the sheath for that knife has on the button snap Bryan Kohberger's DNA. That knife sheath was found underneath one of the victims' bodies at the murder scene. About as good a DNA piece of evidence that you ever want to have in a case. I mean, we're not talking about his DNA was found on the outside door handle, and there might be some reason that he could innocently explain that. Well, I was out canvassing the neighborhood to have everyone participate in the, local can drive or whatever it was, and that's why I happened to knock on that door. Nothing like that. It is on an item that can be argued to be tied to the murder weapon found underneath one of the victims. Everything about it says that the person who left that DNA is likely the murderer in this case. And lo and behold, the person that they find happens to be a person who had their phone turned off during the time of the murders, drives a vehicle very similar to a vehicle seen there during the time of the murders, and a eyewitness describes someone remarkably similar to the defendant. So everything, lo and behold, happens to match up to this person. It is shaping up to be a very strong case for the prosecution, but it all comes down to that DNA. So the defense, realizing that, can only really there's only really two avenues of attack with that DNA. They're either going to have to come up with an innocent explanation for how their client's DNA ended up on that knife sheath. That could be his job is in the knife sheath manufacturing plant, and therefore his DNA somehow ended up on there. Or you're going to find out, I'm sure, from his defense attorneys that touch DNA is now going to become the stickiest thing on earth, and that somehow he touched something which was transferred through investigators to that button, and it was contamination in the collection of it or the preservation of it or something along those lines. Or they're going to have to find a legal mechanism in which to have it kicked out. And that's what we're talking about this evening, and that's what they have just recently filed. And what they filed is an attack against the investigative genetic genealogy, or the IGG, in this case. And essentially what happened is this, and forgive me because I'm really trying to oversimplify this, because we don't really need to get into the weeds to the entire mechanism that took place to understand the arguments attendant here. But the DNA was collected. Idaho law enforcement did not get any hits on that DNA. They ran that through known databases, likely people who were already in the system because they had already committed crimes. It comes back to no one. So no known offenders, nobody in prison, nobody who's ever been through the system. That DNA profile eventually makes its way to the FBI. The FBI runs that DNA through public databases. Those public databases have the genetic profiles of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of different users who have voluntarily put their DNA into a database to try to trace their own genetic tree. There's, 23andMe and Ancestry.com. Those aren't the databases that we're talking about in this case, but there's many other not as well-known databases like this. And they get likely, I think what we're going to learn is information, second cousin twice removed, third cousin over here type of a thing, where they're able to narrow that down to a type of genetic tree to the suspect, and then eliminate people from where they lived and how old they were, to find a likely suspect being a gentleman who happens to be attending a college a few minutes away in Washington, who matches the description, and that's Bryan Kohberger. Then they track Bryan Kohberger down to his home in Pennsylvania, seize garbage from his home, do further testing on the garbage retrieved from that home, to realize that the father, I believe it was, of the individual, their suspect, lives in that home. Now they know their suspect is Bryan Kohberger. They arrest Bryan Kohberger. Based upon that information, they're able to get an arrest warrant. They arrest him. They perform what's called a buccal swab, which means they swab the inside of his cheek to gather cells, and that comes back as one of those genetic matches that is, 1 in 52 quadrillion or whatever it is. And so just so we understand, the profile that was recovered from the button snap matches, as far as, to anybody's degree of certainty, Bryan Kohberger. Okay. So again, that's why it comes down to why it's so important that they get that kicked out, either by saying his DNA was there innocently or legally it shouldn't be allowed. The legal argument that they are trying to make is that, one, they tried some sort of avenue to saying that there was some sort of expectation of privacy in his own DNA. And the judge quickly and handedly threw that out. There is no expectation of privacy. And these are terms that we're going to talk about a few times tonight. And that is expectation of privacy and standing. He has no expectation of privacy and left behind evidence. Okay. If that's a fingerprint, you don't have an expectation of privacy of a fingerprint that you leave at the crime scene, nor do you for your DNA, nor do you for a discarded item, nor do you for hair that falls out of your head, nor do you for your shoe prints that you leave behind at the crime scene. No expectation of privacy there. Then they turn towards the IgG. Was there something about that process that makes it illegal enough and violative of the Fourth Amendment enough that the judge should throw this out? That's what this is all about, is Fourth Amendment search and seizure, the remedy for that being throwing out the evidence. They're saying that somehow the entering of this material into a database, and basically what I understand, my understanding of what they do is they actually just create like a fake profile of a person, throw that onto this database and see if it comes back that that person has any relatives. They're saying that that violated his Fourth Amendment rights. Here's the problem. His Fourth Amendment rights are really not at play in that process. It's the privacy expectations of the people who entered their DNA profile onto the database that are at play. Here's an example. It may be helpful or it may be cumbersome to you, but imagine that the police search a vehicle, and in the trunk of that vehicle, without a warrant, they open the trunk and they find evidence that links me to a crime. But I don't own that vehicle. If I go to court and try to argue illegal search of that vehicle in a violation of my Fourth Amendment rights, the first question is going to be, do you own that vehicle? And if I don't, and I don't have some sort of legal expectation of privacy in a vehicle I don't own, the judge is going to say you have no expectation of privacy in it. You have no standing in the violation of the Fourth Amendment of the search, even if it was a bad search. I don't have, the bad search wasn't against me. It was against the owner of the vehicle. Now you say, well, couldn't the owner of the vehicle come in and say that that was a bad search? Sure. And the judge will turn to them and say, you're not charged with the crime. It's not the people of the state of California versus you, owner of the vehicle. Therefore, you don't have standing to even be in this courtroom. So that's what's happening here, is I believe the judge is going to come down and say, the people who may have had their rights violated, and I'm not even willing to concede that they did, those people who may have had an expectation of privacy in their DNA being on that profile, they don't have standing because they're not the defendant, and the defendant doesn't have standing because it wasn't his DNA profile that was on these databases. We could have a very different conversation if he had entered his DNA profile onto those databases and it came back for a direct hit, because then he might be able to argue, according to the terms and conditions of this profile, I had an expectation of privacy in my DNA being on there, and therefore that was violated. But that's not what is at play here. I hope all of that made sense and didn't make it more confusing. The only thing that the government was willing to concede is that at best, the FBI violated the terms and conditions of the databases where they made these searches, but that still doesn't amount to a Fourth Amendment violation. Thank you, CH. Thank you for saving me from myself and asking a question so I can shut up a little bit. But if Bryan Kohberger had submitted his DNA to one of these databases, would that change the Fourth Amendment argument? I think it would. I don't necessarily know if that would mean that it was a violation and that he would get it excluded, because that's the remedy, is exclusion. That's a big remedy. By the way, what was on the line here is dumping the DNA altogether, which I think tanks the prosecution's entire case. But had he submitted his DNA, I think he could say, listen, I do now have standing for what they did on this database because I am a participant in this database. And when I signed up to this database, they made all sorts of promises about privacy. Therefore, I do have a reasonable expectation of privacy in that. Therefore, they needed a warrant. They didn't have a warrant. Absent a warrant, they don't have some sort of other excuse for violating the Fourth Amendment. Therefore, the only remedy is exclusion. That may have changed things, but that's not what happened here. And that's what was made clear by the judge and the prosecution in this case. So it's an interesting argument, but I really don't feel it's going anywhere. But I also don't fault his team for making that argument because they got to do it. They got to get this DNA out. With that DNA, this trial, in my view, and you guys may feel differently, is going to be a slow walk towards prison and possibly the death chamber for him. T-Suze, who happens to be my wife, just said, where is it? We did it. 20,000. You guys are fantastic. I love that happened while we were doing a live. 20,000 subscribers is pretty cool stuff. Thank you guys very much. That is pretty amazing that we've been able to reach that that goal that we all had been striving for a while in such a short period of time. So I'm very, very grateful to all of you for being on board and being part of this growing community. It's really touching. Thank you guys a lot. I'm so thrilled and tickled that happened while we were actually doing a live. So thank you again to all the new subscribers this evening for pushing us over the edge. It's been a very fun journey reaching this, and stay buckled up. More and more to come. Getting back to Kohberger here, and we'll finish up and then have some announcements, and thank you guys all again. So yeah, just wrapping that up. No joke. No wonder they want to get this DNA kicked out. Let me see if we have any questions before I get on to the other issue that they raised here. Let me see. Does anyone know? Farm Girl says, does anyone know if he had any connections to the victims prior to that night? My understanding is that no, as far as direct interaction with them, but there is, I believe, some evidence that he may have followed them on social media, something along those lines. CH says, did you hear the testimony of the FBI did use the databases that are not permitted? If I missed that, CH, I apologize, and I will look into that. My understanding was that much of the argument was taking place about, my understanding was that they could not access those databases that did not permit it. If they had done that, I stand corrected. But my understanding was that the way that they actually did make the match was not through these databases. So perhaps they did violate the law. But again, might be mind-blowing to you. They can go ahead and violate the law as long as they're not trying to use that evidence. And so if they weren't using the evidence that they used through 23andMe and Ancestry, it's not a problem still in the Kohberger case. Aunt Nancy says, has a motive been established? If so, I've not heard anything. I have not heard solid evidence on motive either, which is not surprising because you would expect that the prosecution would kind of keep that argument in itself a little close to the vest because they don't want to disclose too much on that to have the defense be able to pivot to it if they have a theory on that. The only thing I've ever heard is that he was a kind of an odd duck who was very involved in criminology, and there may be, I don't know if I've heard this, officially or so through the inner gossip threads, just kind of obsessed with the idea of trying this and maybe getting away with it. And if that's true, it's even more disturbing than anything else. And then finally, Oasis Cat says, Courtroom Confidential, T-Sues, when do you guys sleep? Congrats on 20,000 and all that you guys do. Thank you so much, Oasis Cat, and thank you everybody else for all of that. And the answer to that question is we don't sleep. We have 3 little ones and a YouTube channel, and sleep doesn't happen. I've got half of my brain asleep right now. That's how I do it. Half a brain at a time. Farm Girl, thank you so much for gifting the membership. Oh, I've mentioned these before already, but we gifted out some memberships, and Krista Johnson gifted a membership. You guys are all fantastic. If you don't know about the membership program, we put a lot of work into it. You guys should really check it out. Okay, let's get to our announcements, and then I'm going to let you guys go for the evening. Thank you again. I'm so happy that everybody was on this live as we passed that milestone. First of all, to the members, some of our new members: Jennifer Fox 63300, Krista Johnson, Mimi D, Recovery Addict, Woman of Steel, Dragonfly, Dark Willow, Cat Coco 6, Emma, Fab True Crime Addict, Kraken Studio, The Real Booty, K Dubs, Jacqueline Ha, Arkansas Red Cat, AM, Linda Wing, Darlene Whitner, Cyber Sleuth Steph, Barb Olson, and Holly. You guys are all fantastic. Thank you so much for signing up to our membership program. If you want to learn more about the membership program, how do you do that? Well, I'm going to show you. Go to our website, thecourtroomconfidential.com, and you just click on, maybe I'll make myself smaller here. You click on Become a Member, and that will shoot you right over to this tab where you can join our membership, watch my silly video where we talk about all the perks. Stay tuned for our upcoming programming, because last Monday, we had our conversation with Karen and Chris McDonough of the Interview Room. This coming Monday, we're going to have a conversation with Scott Reich of Crime Talk that will premiere on Monday. What's the date? Oh, I'm missing the date. This coming Monday, though. Monday, February 3rd, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. But the reason why I still leave this up here is before that, this coming Sunday, February 2nd, is the next Sunday Fun Day on this channel. And you know what that means. You have to come over here on the Courtroom Confidential website. You have to click on Send a Voice Message, and you have to do one shot of full grain liquor. I'll let you choose, and then click on that Start Recording button and leave us a message and ask us a question, give us a comment, just say hello, whatever you want to do. But we are going to be playing those voice messages on this coming Sunday. We did it last time we did a Sunday Fun Day, and it was a lot of fun. And we get to hear you all, people whose names we see all over the chat. Now we got to hear your voice, and you asked some amazing questions, and we had a really fun conversation. So that is coming up on this Sunday. And then finally, if you want to check out the merch, we're always adding new stuff. You just click on the shop, and that shoots you right over to where we have all of our fun merchandise that we're working on. All right, you guys, you're all fantastic. Thank you so much for being here while we pass that milestone. Bonnie Bailey, thank you so much for the super sticker. Thank you again to Melanie Little for all of her help this evening and walking us through the madness of Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. And thank you guys, everybody in the chat and everybody who joined us this evening. This was really fun. I'm going to go celebrate. More to come. You guys are fantastic. Thank you again. Have a great evening.